Chapter 17. Freshman Ruler. After resting for 2 hours, the competition finals finally started. Gian Chen and Tita walked into the arena together before walking to opposite ends 10 meters apart. There were over 1,000 students watching the arena already, while even more people were trying to find seats. Gian Chen looked at Tita with a smile as he spoke. He praised Tita. "Tita, I didn't think you were this amazing to be able to end up in the finals." Hearing Gian Chen's compliment, Tita's face reddened from embarrassment, though it was obvious that he was very happy to hear the praise. With an honest laugh, Tita spoke in a low voice. "Changyang Xiang Tian, you're just as amazing." Stretching his arms and legs, Jian Chen laughed. "Tita, this is the final round. Only one of us will be crowned the freshman ruler, so you need to fight your hardest. If you beat me, then you'll be the champion. By winning, you'll earn a Class 3 monster core that is worth a few hundred purple coins. It'll be worth enough to feed your family for a lifetime." Tita grew pumped up after hearing Gian Chen talk. "Changyang Xiang Tian, I'll definitely use all of my strength, so you'd better prepare yourself." Gian Chen could only laugh and nod. "I won't be that easy to defeat." Boom! As the gong sounded to indicate the beginning of the match, Tita immediately rushed forward after the sound. Tita rushed at Gian Chen and immediately reached out to grab him with both hands. He planned to use his heavenly blessed strength to lift and throw Gian Chen out of the arena. Realizing his plan, Gian Chen laughed. He was already extremely familiar with Tita's style of fighting. For every single match so far, Tita had used the same strategy, but it had worked nicely. If Gian Chen was caught by him, then it would be extremely difficult to escape from Tita's grasp. Gian Chen retreated a few steps to escape from Tita's reach. Clenching his left hand into a fist, he used around 80% of his strength to strike at his chest. Gian Chen's fist was well-timed and fast, not allowing Tita any time to react at all. Pang! Gian Chen's fist let out a muffled sound on impact against Tita's chest. However, Gian Chen's look of satisfaction slowly changed, while Tita had a look of amazement. What he had punched did not feel like a human at all. Instead, his fist had felt like it had smashed against a wall. Not only was Tita strong, but his physical body was extremely robust, so robust that it was actually beyond belief. Gian Chen's punch, however, had forced Tita to stagger backwards, but only for a moment. Roaring out loud, he charged at Gian Chen once more, with both of his hands outstretched. With a punch using only 80% of his strength, Gian Chen didn't even leave a mark on Tita's skin. Gian Chen began to feel excitement as he watched Tita come closer with his fists. He didn't bother to dodge or flee. Instead, he prepared to use 100% of his power to strike back with his own hands. The two fists struck against each other in mid-air, and the impact created a loud sound. It was so loud that everyone in the crowd below the arena could hear it as clear as day. As the two fists made contact, Gian Chen's feet couldn't help but slide backwards at least 10 meters before finally stopping. His right hand had already started to tremble, so it was clear to see that Gian Chen had taken more damage than given. Even though he had surpassed the average cultivation level for Saint Force, he was still far from the level where he could easily ignore damage from something like this. Tita, on the other hand, only slid backwards 2 meters. His face showed no outward emotion, and he appeared to not have suffered even the smallest amount of damage. Gian Chen rubbed at his reddening hand. After 2 confrontations, he now fully understood how foolish it was to engage with Tita straight on. Tita's strength wasn't just used for intimidation. His body was actually inconceivably strong. Even someone a level stronger than Tita could not be his equal. The only thing that could lead to victory against Tita was if one relied on speed. "Tita, your strength has already far surpassed my expectations, but I'll be using my full strength now," Jian Chen said as he walked forward. Tita laughed. "Come then, Changyang Xiang Tian. You won't be able to hurt me." Tita's tone was filled with a fierce conviction. Jian Chen stopped his idle chatter as well. When the distance between him and Tita had been reduced to only 5 to 6 meters, his footsteps suddenly changed. His legs became a mysterious blur that suddenly reappeared behind Tita. Before Tita could even react, 2 fierce fists landed consecutive blows on his back. Dong! 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 A constant series of muffled blows came ringing out from the arena, almost as if it was just a single continuous line of sounds. Under such heavy attacks, even Tita's body couldn't help but falter forward so much that he was left with very little time to turn around. Ha! Tita snarled in anger as he tried to steady himself. Suddenly, he turned around with his fists out and tried to smash them into Gian Chen. The moment when Tita tried to attack Gian Chen, he lightly leapt 2 meters into the air. Narrowly dodging Tita's fist, Jian Chen used both of his legs to kick at Tita from midair. Both of his legs held formidable power, and they thrusted towards Tita's back. Dong! 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 Jian Chen lashed out with his feet several times before landing back onto the ground. By this point, Tita's face had been kicked by Jian Chen multiple times, causing his face to bruise all over. Immediately after landing on the ground, Jian Chen turned around on the floor and bent his legs down without pausing. His left leg revolved in a 180-degree arc. His right leg swept at Tita's own legs. Ping! Tita's leg crumbled down below him, but he immediately bounced back up and snarled as he rushed at Jian Chen. Jian Chen and Tita began to engage in another close combat situation, but with Tita's God-given strength and his frighteningly robust body, Jian Chen had no chance of winning against him. Since Jian Chen had already experienced it twice, he had thought of a countermeasure for this situation. Although it wasn't the best idea, he had no other ways of fighting against him. Jian Chen had decided to rely on his nimbleness to fight against Tita. Even though Tita's body was extremely strong, Jian Chen had been attacking the same place on Tita's body to make it so that Tita would feel so much pain he would eventually be forced to grimace. The following situation was now becoming one-sided, with Jian Chen relying on the experience he had accumulated over the past world to constantly beat Tita so much that he could only run around with his hands over his head. Although at times Tita had found some opportunities to fight back, he was not able to hurt Jian Chen. His attacks could not even touch Jian Chen's clothes at all. At this display, every student in the audience could only watch the match in shock. No matter how fast Jian Chen was with his martial arts, his speed had far outstripped the average person, causing all of the students to look on with great interest, as it was something they had never witnessed before. On the top of the platform, Jian gasped in admiration as he watched Jian Chen. This kid is definitely a unique one. His battle experience is rich, and his speed isn't slow at all either. It seems this student is called Changyang Xiangtian, so judging from his name, he is from Lori City's Changyang clan. It seems that I really will have to make a report to the headmaster later. As the battle continued to persist, Tita finally reached his limit. He cried out loud and exclaimed, "Stop! Stop! I can't fight anymore! I give up!" Jian Chen immediately stopped his attack and smiled brightly at Tita. "Why aren't you fighting anymore?" Tita rubbed at the reddening spots where Jian Chen had repeatedly hit with a miserable face and said sadly, "You move so fast that I can't even see you clearly. There's no way I'd be able to attack you, so the entire time was just you wailing on me." Laughing, Jian Chen asked, "So you're just going to give up the #1 spot then?" Although Jian Chen hadn't held back as he fought against Tita, his skin was so thick and his body was so strong that there was barely any serious damage done to him at all. Tita nodded his head and spoke in a muffled voice. "I won't be able to beat you, so the #1 spot isn't mine to have. Second place is already decent enough. A Class 2 monster core can be sold for a decent price too." Afterwards, the two students walked off the stage while the third-place winner was announced. Kadi Liang and Tian Mu Xiong, who had fought it out against each other in a battle to determine the winner. In the end, it was Tian Mu Xiong who had won and claimed the title of third place. After the quota for the top 3 players was met, Jian Chen was called up onto the platform. As the vice-headmaster Jian walked towards him, he glanced at Jian Chen with no small amount of admiration. Immediately looking away, he turned his head to look at the 1,000 students in the audience and announced, "Dear students, this year's freshman competition has finally come to a conclusion. I declare the freshman ruler of this year to be the student Changyang Xiangtian, who is an 8th Saint Force Layer practitioner." The vice-headmaster Jian spoke in a firm voice, causing everyone to applaud and cheer. But as some of the 9th St. Force Layer students heard the new freshman ruler was at the 8th St. Force Layer, many of them couldn't accept that. However, they could only grumble out their displeasure. But Gian Chen's strength was something they could accept. Some of them had even been dazzled by the way he fought, and his speed was something that not many people could dismiss. This year's freshmen are really too useless. In front of so many people that had reached the 9th St. Force level, the final freshman ruler ended up being a youth at the 8th St. Force Layer. This is really too embarrassing. That's true. Today's freshmen were really too weak. Not only was the title of freshman ruler taken by a person at the 8th St. Force Layer, I heard that the suntanned youth in second place was also someone who was only at the 8th St. Force Layer. I really don't know what these freshmen had practiced to the 9th St. Force Layer for. The two people that spoke were seniors wearing the academy uniform. Their tone were filled with a mocking voice towards those who had lost against the two. Hearing the two students complain, another one of the seniors replied to them, "You guys shouldn't even say anything. It's not that those freshmen who reached the 9th St. Force Layer were weak, but it's because those 8th St. Force Layer students were stronger than them by a large margin. That suntanned kid had strength that could scare anyone. Don't tell me you guys didn't see how those 9th St. Force Layer students were easily thrown out of the arena. If it were us that were fighting instead, I'm sure that we wouldn't have been better off than the freshmen." As for that first-place freshman, his strength was even more terrifying. Did you guys also miss how fast he was moving around and attacking? Even if it were us in that same situation, we would have a hard time trying to dodge his attacks. Other than those two students, many other seniors of the academy were also discussing the matches amongst themselves. They had already been at the academy for so many years, but this year's competition had left them speechless. This year's freshman batch had many students who reached the 9th St. Force Layer, but no one had expected that the top two students would be 8th St. Force Layer students. Soon after, Gian Chen obtained the Class 3 Monster Core as a reward. It was a deep red in color, and was bigger than the Monster Core than the one his brother had given him earlier. Holding his hand up, Gian Chen could clearly feel the huge amount of power radiating from the core. The huge amount of energy in the core and the true chi in his previous world had a very small difference, but as far as Gian Chen was concerned, the energy coming from the core was extremely huge. Aside from the Monster Core, Jian Chen had also received a medal that was cast in complete gold, with a decorative design written on it. From what Jian Chen had heard, there was no information on the medal he had won, so he had no idea what use the medal was for. But as he was trying to figure it out, the Vice Headmaster Bai En explained to him, "This medal can only be rewarded to the first-place winner of every freshman competition. As long as you have this, then you will be given a Class 1 Monster Core every month. Other than that, the medal allows the wearer to access the first 5 layers of the library." Chapter 18. The Monster Core's Cultivation Rate Support. Every month, a Class 1 Monster Core will be given, as well as free access to the first 5 levels of the library. Hearing Bai En's explanation, Jian Chen's heart swelled up in marvel. Could it be that the students weren't able to even get a Monster Core every month? And who would have thought that the library would have a restriction imposed on it? Receiving the medal, Jian Chen had already planned to ask his brother Changyang Hu about this later. He had already been in this academy for 3 or 4 days, but 3 of the days had been completely occupied by the martial arts competition. Even for the first day, he had barely half the day to himself, so he had very little time to find out more about the academy. After Jian Chen exited from the arena, both Tita and Tianmu Xiong walked forward to accept their own prizes. After the ending ceremony, the crowd of students had already begun to disperse. "Fourth brother, you're seriously amazing. You really did win first place in the competition. Once father hears about this, he'll definitely be very happy about this." As the two walked towards his dorm, Changyang Hu kept chattering away happily with Jian Chen. As the two continued to talk, Jian Chen started to laugh, as he couldn't help but feel the warm feelings he had remembered from his mother. If mother found out about this, she would definitely be beyond happy, Jian Chen thought to himself. In a flash, Changyang Hu and Jian Chen arrived at the dorms and entered Jian Chen's room. Changyang Hu impatiently asked Jian Chen, "Fourth brother, hurry up and show me the Class 3 Monster Core." Looking at Chen Ge's still excited expression, Gian Chen laughed and brought out the monster core from his space belt, handing it over to Chen Ge. Chen Ge took the core into his hand and turned it around endlessly, almost as if it was a treasured object. He clicked his tongue in admiration. "Fourth brother, you're seriously amazing. To immediately get a Class 3 monster core straight after entering the academy. Your older brother has already been at this academy for over 2 years, and the most I ever got was a Class 2 monster core. Moreover, I had to pay money for it." Hearing this, Gian Chen could only chuckle. "Big brother, I've heard that you've already reached the peak of the 10th layer and will soon break through to the Saint level. You should take this Class 3 monster core." Gian Chen didn't regard the monster core as an important item, and although the Class 3 monster core would increase the rate of cultivation, Gian Chen didn't need it at all. Chen Ge was stunned at Gian Chen's words, but he quickly regained his wits and placed the Class 3 monster core back within Gian Chen's hands and said, "That won't do. This Class 3 monster core was something that fourth brother got after going through a painstaking amount of trouble. How could your big brother take something like this?" Looking at the newly returned Class 3 monster core, Gian Chen smiled. He truly admired his big brother's actions just then. At the very least, he wouldn't have to worry that Chen Ge would be like third brother Chen Ge and become an obstacle towards him. Once again, Gian Chen placed the Class 3 monster core in Chen Ge's hands. "Big brother, this Class 3 monster core would be best with you." This time, Gian Chen really wanted Chen Ge to accept the monster core. "Definitely not." Chen Ge's refusal came out strong and clear without any hesitation. He handed the monster core back to Gian Chen and said, "Fourth brother, this monster core should be used by you. This is your reward for being the freshman ruler. This item is definitely not something your big brother would want from you." Seeing how persistent his brother Chen Ge was, Gian Chen could only helplessly take back the Class 3 monster core. After that, Gian Chen began to ask his older brother a few questions regarding the affairs of the academy. It had taken 3 hours for Chen Ge to carefully explain every single rule that Gian Chen didn't understand about the academy, increasing Gian Chen's familiarity with the academy. First was Carath Academy's headmaster, who favored students that weren't from a noble background. If he found a noble bullying a commoner, the student would definitely not be able to escape from punishment. Regarding battles between nobles, he would turn a blind eye, as long as it didn't turn into a major deal. Other than that, he didn't care about them at all. Also, within the Carath Academy, one would have to reach the Great Saint level in order to graduate. Those who graduate had the choice to remain in the academy, or with the Carath Academy's recommendation, they could vow loyalty to a kingdom and join their army. Those with a great amount of potential would be able to earn a higher salary with the academy's recommendation. Within the academy, those under the level of a saint would have the chance to receive a Class 1 monster core every month to use to help their cultivations. The students who were at the saint level and condensed a saint weapon would be able to earn a Class 2 monster core every month. Aside from this, these students would also be able to go to the forest 20 miles away from the Carath Academy to hunt magical beasts for their cores. Although the forest wasn't big, it still took up around 10 kilometers of area. The magical beasts inside the forest were all set free by the academy, but most of them were generally low-leveled magical beasts. Their attack strengths were amongst the lowest of the beasts, and receiving a serious injury was unlikely. Carath Academy bred these low-leveled magical beasts for the students to practice their martial arts in a real combat situation, as well as to allow the magical beasts to adapt to the wild. The strongest magical beast in the forest was no stronger than a Class 2 beast, while many of the animals were just regular wild beasts who couldn't even measure up to a Class 1 magical beast. However, if a Class 2 magical beast were to appear, then the academy would send out a few experts to take care of the monster in order to prevent the students from getting hurt. The forest was separated into 3 regions. The first region was full of wild beasts who didn't even reach the level of a Class 1 magical beast. The second region was a place where Class 1 magical beasts dwelled. The final region was full of Class 2 magical beasts. All 3 areas had been successfully sealed and blockaded against the other areas by the previous generations of the Headmaster, so no one would have to worry about the monsters escaping from the forest. The academy also had a library, which was separated into 7 levels. Inside the library was a great amount of books, with an abundant amount of information. Aside from books about the continent's history, there were also many secret training manuals for practitioners. Students who had not yet reached Saint level would only be able to access the first 2 levels of the library. The moment a student reaches the level of a saint and condenses her saint force into a saint weapon, then she would be able to enter the 3rd and 4th levels. For any level above the 4th, the only people who could enter were teachers or students at Great Saint level. By the time Chang Yang-hu had finished telling Gian Chen about the information regarding the school, it was already quite late during the night. Chang Yang-hu thus hurried out of Gian Chen's dorm and ran towards his own dormitory. Meanwhile, at the top of a tower that was situated in the center of Carath Academy, the vice headmaster Bai En respectfully stood in front of an office desk. In front of him was actually the headmaster Gian Chen had met before. The headmaster of Carath Academy extended his arm and stroked his long beard. Indifferently looking at the vice headmaster, he said, "Bai En, did you say that the name of the freshman who won the competition was a kid called Changyang Xiangtian?" The headmaster's tone held a hint of surprise. Bai En nodded his head and said, "Yes, headmaster. I found out that Changyang Xiangtian is quite remarkable. He is only at the 8th layer of Saint Force, but can already defeat freshmen that are at the 9th layer. His attacks are not only aggressive, but also quite agile and nimble. It also seems that he has plenty of combat experience, which does not match up with the strength he should have. Even Tita, who has a body with heavenly force, lost to Jian Chen in a simple manner, unable to even counterattack." Hearing this, the headmaster furrowed his brows and asked, "Bai En, is what you're saying really true? Is Changyang Xiangtian really that amazing?" "Headmaster, everything I said is the truth," said Bai En in a firm voice. The headmaster slowly rose from his chair and muttered, "It looks like this kid Changyang Xiangtian is a bigger genius than Chang Bai said. He didn't use any sort of monster core or heavenly treasure, and was still able to reach the 8th layer of the Saint Force by the age of 15. How astonishing of a feat. To think that he also has an abundant amount of battle experience. Something like this is unfathomable." Even the headmaster's voice carried a hint of astonishment. Hearing the headmaster mumble to himself, Bai En also had an astonished look on his face. The fact that he had not used any heavenly treasure or monster core to reach the 8th layer by the age of 15 was a type of talent within the Jisun kingdom that could only be regarded as something a gifted genius could have. "Headmaster, it looks like this Changyang Xiangtian has a limitless future." Bai En sighed. The headmaster nodded his head and said, "As long as he can continue to grow this way, then the skill he displayed today will definitely develop into something greater. It looks like our Carath Academy will finally be able to boast of a strong individual, as long as he doesn't die on the road to greatness. As long as he really grows into a strong individual of the Tianyuan continent, then not only our Carath Academy become well known, but our Gesun Kingdom's reputation within the continent would also increase. Right now, the surrounding kingdoms around us are getting more and more restless. After these 10 or so years, if our Gesun Kingdom doesn't have any strong individuals, then I'm afraid that sooner or later, one of the kingdoms around us will attack." After hearing this, Bai En's face gradually grew solemn. The Gesun Kingdom was neither a big kingdom nor a small kingdom, but it had fertile lands that many of the surrounding kingdoms were envious of. If it were not for the 6 experts of Gesun Kingdom, then the surrounding kingdoms would have long since attacked them. Bai En pondered for a bit before carefully asking, "Headmaster, should we consider giving away Class 1 and 2 monster cores to Changyang Xiangtian for free then? That way we could improve our relationship with him." The headmaster considered the vice-headmaster's proposal for a bit before shaking his head. "That won't be possible. Although using a monster core can be used to increase one's cultivation rate, there are side effects of abusing it. Changyang Xiangtian is currently very young. We cannot allow him to become addicted to using monster cores. Otherwise, when he reaches the later levels, his foundation will be very shaky, which will obstruct his future progress. At his current age, he should quietly focus on self-discipline. It would help lay down the foundations and increase his chance of success in making a breakthrough." "Yes, Headmaster. Bai En understands what to do now." Jian didn't dare to act against the headmaster. Besides, what the headmaster had said made plenty of sense. "Headmaster, how do you plan to handle Tita?" Jian asked. "Tomorrow morning, bring Tita to me. If he is willing, I will take him in as a personal disciple." The headmaster replied after thinking about it for a while. "Yes, headmaster." After Chen Ge left his room, Gian Chen sat on his bed and contemplated the new information for a while. Afterwards, he crossed his legs, and with the Class 3 monster core in his hand, he began to absorb the energy from the Class 3 monster core into his body. Inside the monster core was the soul of a magical beast. The energy within was not only pure, but also fairly strong. According to what Chen Ge had said, the moment Gian Chen started to absorb the monster core, then he would start to feel a long stream of pure and strong energy flowing out of the core. It would flow up through his arm and slowly be absorbed within his body. Gian Chen manipulated the constant outward flow from the monster core to guide the energy into his body. Constantly refining the energy into his body, he gradually changed the energy into Saint Force before gradually absorbing it into his Dantian. Using a monster core to cultivate really did increase the cultivation rate by many times. Because of the normal way of cultivation, one would normally have to absorb the world essence slowly before finally converting to one's own energy, but that couldn't compare to the speed of a monster core. The natural chi couldn't compare to the pure soul energy of a monster core. After all, the soul of a monster core was the purest part of the beast. Using the energy from a monster core, the speed of cultivation would increase by 10 times. For this reason, monster cores were extremely expensive, even if it was only a Class 1 monster core. Multiple rays of light gradually appeared between the sky and land. The bright red sun finally struggled to climb into the sky, sending forth the soft and warm rays of sunlight. The golden sunlight with tens of thousands of rays of light illuminated the earth, as if the whole ground was dyed into a golden carpet. At the same time, the Gian Chen, who was sitting cross-legged on the bed, slowly opened his eyes. His eyes showed a happy expression, and the corners of his mouth also showed a hint of a smile. After last night's cultivation, Gian Chen had received many gains, equivalent to a few days' worth of training. By absorbing the power within the magical stone, Gian Chen's cultivation speed had actually increased by 10 times. Right now, he could clearly feel that the saint power inside his body had increased by a ton. Based on his calculations, he wasn't far from reaching the 9th Saint Force layer. According to his current speed, at most, it would only take a weekend's worth of time to reach the 9th Saint Force layer. Of course, this was only Gian Chen's estimate. The exact values had to be tested. If the fact that the amount of power that Gian Chen had absorbed from within the magical stone was 10 times more than the amount normally gained from cultivating was discovered by others, they would definitely be devastated from shock. Even though the magical stone could quickly increase the rate of cultivation, it was also far from achieving the frightening pace of 10 times faster under normal circumstances. The average person using the magical stone to cultivate would normally only increase cultivation rate by 2 or 3 times. Even if the person was slightly more powerful, his or her cultivation rate would only be raised by 6 or 7 times. Considering the fact that Gian Chen's power wasn't even saint level, the fact that he could increase his cultivation rate by 10 times was definitely an extremely frightening pace. Seeing the magic stone in his hands, although the stone's color didn't change at all, Jian Chen clearly felt that the magic stone had shrunk by a circle after being gripped in his hand for the whole time. After leaving the dorm, Jian Chen directly arrived at the dining hall. This morning, the dining hall's breakfast was a bit more plentiful. Besides, from a glass of magical beast milk, there was also some magical beast meat. Gian Chen had eaten quite a bit of magical beast meat in the Changyang household, and the taste was quite delicious. In his previous world, Jian Chen had never eaten such savory meat before.